In community, we come together in deep feeling, in gratitude, and in the sacred mystery of spirit to rejoice and honor the blessing that is Marion Woodman. Will you please join me in welcoming Marion Woodman? Marion.
Thank you very much. It's quite something to stand here tonight, I can tell you. And to see faces that I know very, very well. To see other faces that are somewhat hidden by white hair. It wasn't white the last time I saw you, or a bald head. But if I look long enough, I can see the essence and the glowing radiance that I once knew. It's wonderful to be here. I'm very happy to be here, I must say. You know, I hear that some of you thought that it was like going to one's own funeral. But in fact, several people have told me that. But I don't feel that. I'm happy to be alive, to look at you, and to be able to share tonight what we want to share. I want, first of all, to just go back through the history of Pacifica and my history here. I don't know, I think I was here before Pacifica was founded. At least the Pacifica that I went to was one room above a store downtown with one naked light bulb. And there may have been 5 students there. But we had a wonderful class and carried on the next year with some other place. And so we seemed to be wandering around, but always we had students and fun, and I loved it. Then came this wonderful place that now exists, and even Ladera this year. So it's such a huge accomplishment, Steve, Marion, those of you on the board, whoever is responsible. It's simply magnificent. And I am very, very happy to have been a part of it for at least 20 years and hope to be for some time to come. I remember certainly many long, wonderful weekends, particularly with people like Robert Johnson, whom I see in the group. I think it's Robert. And I remember so many speakers who had such a profound influence on me. So I feel the coming and going within my relationship to Pacifica. I also would like to remember Barbara McClintock. I don't know if Barbara's here tonight, but she was a huge influence on me during those years. You have to remember, I lived in London, Ontario, and San Francisco was a long way away, and California was big, big stuff. And the first time I came down here, I was absolutely terrified. And I can remember Barbara McClintock picked me up, that this was in San Francisco, and she was taking me that night I was to speak in her van, and I was sort of huddled against the door. This was my first speech down here, and I was just thinking, you know, I should have stayed home. Should have been sick, something. And then we saw a crowd of people with umbrellas, pink and blue, around a corner, and I said, "Who's that? Who's coming? Who's in town?" And she said, "Woodman." And I thought, you know, all I have to do is push down the handle on this door and follow in the I should never have left the basement in Port Stanley. But we got along all right, and it's just been the most wonderful interchange between Canada and California, particularly when Canada is cold with ice and snow and storm, and this is 80 degrees. I'd like also to tell you another thing about Barbara McClintock that was huge. She used to do my brochures presentations for me, and I would send down to her what I was going to speak about, and she would send back the beautiful brochure, and I would read it and I'd think, she hasn't got the right person at all. And I phoned her and I said, you know, you've got my presentation all mixed up with somebody else. No, she said, I just tweaked yours. And I was quite nervous, and I went back and read it, and I thought, you know, that is what I'm going to say. And her conclusion is absolutely right. And she was able to take my ideas and mirror them back to me in a way that sounded quite brilliant and organized and new. It was a huge leap in my maturing into being on the circuit, as they say. The other thing that I would have to tell you, my husband Ross is a real old films buff. He loves old films. And there was a house up on the hill at one time. I know it's probably still there. And we stayed with Barbara there when we came down here. And Ross actually had the privilege of teaching Keats in front of the fireplace that Greta Garbo and Leopold Stokowski built when they lived in that house. So that was very, very big in Ross's life. One more memory, and that is the memory of the graduating with that class in the Rose Garden one glorious afternoon. And when I was thinking of coming tonight, I said to Steve, you know, I really would like to wear the colors of Pacifica, just to say I am a part of this place. So we've got the colors on. Mixed in with these memories, of course, is a strong, strong feeling about the earth. I can't tell you what it is to step out of an airplane from ice and snow that's been there since November, and to step out into orange and blue and purple and glory on all sides. To watch the sunrise every morning, the sunset every night, to be a part of that diurnal world, and to hear the bird calls, to see the hens, eggs, and the hens themselves on Pacifica ground. It is, you know, coming right back into nature where your body is actually beating to the rhythm of the earth. And I think it's just huge to be able to walk on healthy soil in the world that we're living in. So that is part of the mystique around Pacifica for me. Now, having to speak tonight has forced me to ask myself, what are the blossoms that bloomed in the fire? And thinking about that, I thought that was a really inspired title. That's the story of my life right there. Good for Steve and Tony. Tony has done so much work for this. And then I thought, that's familiar. And of course, it's a Zen koan from Addiction to Perfection. So I went and got the book, and sure enough, there it was. Ride your horse along the edge of the sword. Hide yourself in the middle of the flames. Blossoms of the fruit tree bloom in the fire. The sun rises in the evening. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to meditate on that koan tonight in terms of my life. And I hope that the crossroads that have been mine and the decisions, perhaps, the difficulties, may resonate with yours, so that by the end of Sunday, you'll have maybe more insight, more questions about your own crossroads and your own journey. I just want to say that journeys always are in spirals, not straight lines. I don't speak in straight lines, in case you didn't know. So, for better or for worse, I am a minister's daughter. In my childhood, that fact instantaneously removed me from the common round in the classroom. The word minister carried a certain mystique that separated his wife and children out from the other students. We were also removed because we knew we were not citizens of the towns in which we lived. We moved about every 5 years. My two brothers and I played our archetypal games. Parsonage, archetypal, baptisms, weddings, funerals. And other kids weren't all that interested in baptisms and funerals. However, we had a big wagon, and we would take the coffin through the streets and, of course, pick up cookies at all the particular spots. We baptized baby robins. We created ropes of tin cans and swept up confetti from 1 week to the next, just to be sure we had enough for each one of the brides and grooms that were married in our parlor. And when the war was on, there were no big weddings. They simply came and were married at our house. We would sit and watch them through a mirror, the three of us on the couch being absolutely still. And the minute they went to sign the register, we were out and tying on the cans. I don't know if you did that, but in our country, tying cans on tin cars was on tin whatever. It was really very important. Of course, we came to death, and that was a slightly different thing. I often went with my mother or my father to a dying parishioner. I was quite good at winding pipes with newspaper, and I went often with my father to the Indian Reserve. The war was on, and the Indians wouldn't allow anyone but my father to bring telegrams to the reserve. He was a very patient man. He knew the Indian mentality, and he would sit for hours with them. So when we went to the longhouse. We waited, the chief would come, and then, as if by some miracle, the tribe would start to arrive. And when they were all present, the chief would turn to my father and say, "Who is it this time?" And my father would gently speak the name. And then we would sit for another hour or so and leave. And even at that time, I could visualize the dead soldier on the battlefield. I could sense the anguish of the Indians around me. And I was also aware of the horror of the distance between the reserve and the town. It seemed a long, and was a long road. Holding the reins of my horse, I'm going to keep referring back to that koan, holding the reins of my horse on that level of grief prepared me for holding the tension of the opposites. Looking back now, I see that for me, that was the beginning of presence. I could feel the enormity of the various situations that we got into, particularly during the war when I was quite young. I knew that my task was to hold my horse on that thin and sacred edge. I say sacred because there's something, and I wasn't able to get the full thing about this, but there's something about the tempering of the sword and the exactness of the heat and the sharpness that is considered sacred in that medieval world. Knowing that that was my task has been the story of my life. I have been blessed with parents, brothers, husband, professors, friends, colleagues, who have forced me to take the responsibility of my decisions, even when it was clear that the edge I was traveling on was going straight into the fire. For example, because I tend to fall in love with my work, I never want to leave it, nor do I want to leave the security of my friends who share the challenge, the fun, the inspiration. At university, I walked that sacred edge for 2 years, carrying enough courses either to stay in biology with my beloved microscope, or to move into honors English and return my soul to her home and native land in poetry. My soul cried out for poetry when I was in science. And she wanted the human touch. She wanted to explore. And she couldn't find that warmth in the cold microscope. And so I graduated in honors English. And I secured my teaching certificate. Then my horse leapt into a fearsome crossroad. At the time, it made perfect sense to me, and all my friends and relatives were appalled. I was 21 years old. I could no longer live with being a good girl, good student, faithful daughter, Miss Goody Two-Shoes. Anorexia created flames in which I was burning. I never knew what clothes I would be able to wear the next day. I saw an advertisement in the newspaper. I responded. I telephoned Ottawa, the capital of Canada, and they said if I was interested to go down to Prévost in London, Ontario. Now, Prévost is a so-called boat in, boat, it is, in London. It's just a building, but it's fixed up as a boat. I did go to Prévost, and I was accepted, and I walked out of that ship with the full assurance that I would soon be a lieutenant in the Royal Navy with an excellent personnel job, a splendid uniform. I would never have to make choices about my clothes again. I would travel to foreign countries, and I would retire at 41 with an excellent pension. I thought it was great. Solved all my problems. For the first time in my life, my family and friends roared their disapproval. I wanted to be taken care of. I was 21, but a very young 21 in terms of getting along in the world. I knew how to get along with death and all those other things, but I didn't have any idea about the world. So I knew I had to be taken care of. I knew my clothes never were right, and I would have a uniform in the nunnery as much as in the Navy. And I needed to visit the foreign lands. The Roman Catholic Church would let me go wherever I wanted. I was sure of that. And I also had this one thing, and that was my spiritual life might not flourish if I didn't go into the nunnery. So I talked to all my friends who were nuns, and of course they encouraged me. I read Hildegard, I read St. Teresa, St. Joan, and I thought, this is for me. But then I read the history of little Teresa. And there was a story of her being told by her mother superior to go out and plant cabbages upside down because she had to learn obedience. And I thought, if that's obedience, I'll never take the law of obedience. I could never take such a vow. So that was the end of the nunnery. Obedience was never my great passion. Still isn't. Freedom became my talisman. A teaching post opened in Northern Ontario, late August, and to Timmins I went. I rode my horse to teach mathematics and English. That's a combination. What I did not know was the winter immensity of that vast wasteland. Silence and slow time. My students were Slavs, Croatians, Germans, Italians, Ukrainians, you name it, that's what they were. Only 2 spoke English as a native language. You can imagine trying to teach Shakespeare to students in grade 13 who were expected to pass national examinations. However, they did it. Saturday nights at the pavilion was full of families, from infants to great-grandparents. At 12 o'clock at night, the too young and the too old went home, and the hall became a contre-dance pavilion. Everybody doing the same dance up and down the whole hall with one color. It was a family, life, vitality, and often we danced till 6 o'clock. Very, very intricate dance, and demanded everything you had, but the cherishing in that pavilion was magnificent. I was free. I was in that world where nobody was at home, and life was whatever joy we could drown in. My goal for that year was to make enough money and to have enough courage to go to Europe alone. No one I knew saw any common sense in my sojourn, and I was not absolutely sure of my own solutions either. However, I decided I was going to Europe, and in January I bought my ticket to leave on June the 30th for England, to sail. That was the big thing, to sail to England. And on June the 30th, I sailed. I did all I could to bring myself together to actually be present on that journey. Meantime, I am holding myself as firmly as possible in my own flames. What were those flames? Any of you who have dealt with anorexia know how hot those flames can be. Certainly, their heat intensified my efforts to find myself. Each day I wrote in my journal, often doing what we now call active imagination, in which the ego dialogues with the other parts of the psyche, speaking with the unconscious and bringing up the unconscious answers, some positive, some negative, holding up a metaphorical mirror, as it were, before its own face. So I thought I'd just give you an example from my journal. Was I being true to myself in that encounter tonight? When did I start to try to please him with what I said? How did I betray myself? When did I slip into persona? Was my laughter real? Is my new slinky red dress really sexy? And am I ready for that dress? Well, who do you think you are? Comes a voice from the cellar. Rumble, rumble. I thought I would phone my parents and just see how everybody was at home. And then I said, no, I will not get on that phone. I will stay with my problem. I will hold my own consciousness. I will hold. I will try on my new dress I will sachet. You can't imagine what a big thing that was for me. Sachet, you all know sachet? Well, if you don't, you should try it. I will put on my jewelry. I did eat some yogurt today. I did. Energy sure does follow image. I got the message. Energy follows image. Journaling has kept me on my search for my own being since the age of 12. Now, of course, the big fire, which I'm not going to tell you about, but this is the biggest fire of my life, and the first blossoms in the fire, that was my marriage to Ross Woodman. Now, if all goes well, he's going to speak about this tomorrow. And it's a relationship with much light and much dark. Or I should really say the two together, because they're always the two sides were present. They burned away the dross and left the gold. I tell you at this age, a precious gift. The sun rising in the evening. And even as I hear that, I hear the rumble of Emily's poem, Emily Dickinson's poem. The farthest thunder that I heard was nearer than the sky, and rumbles still, though torrid noons have cast their missiles by. The lightning that preceded it struck no one but myself. But I would not exchange the bolt for all the rest of life. I just do that last part for you again. I think I need a drink. There's quite a bit of emotion here, which I'm trying to hold. The lightning that preceded it struck no one but myself, but I would not exchange the bolt for all the rest of life. Most of my life, since the age of 35, I have put into my books. I haven't always said it was that I was contributing to the book, but I seem, and I'm sure this is true of all analysts, where you are in a deep, deep process yourself, you attract people who are in the same process at the very deepest level. And so the books follow a progression. And it seemed that the analysts that had passed a certain place and weren't interested in going any further simply dropped out. And then the ones who wanted to really grapple came in. And so it was that's how the material came into the books. Most of you I know very well, or many of you I know very well, and I don't want to repeat stories. I just need to say here, though, that the immense shift in my life came with my trip to India. The conglomerate of poverty, innocence, love, ferocity, delight, stripped my ego. I was forced to surrender to a divine guidance and love. In India, I was totally helpless. I had no control over everything. Now, an anorexic wants control over everything and will panic if she can't have it. I was in a situation where I could control nothing. By the 4th day there, I was very, very ill. I couldn't go outside. I didn't think I knew I couldn't go into the street. And I just prayed Lear's prayer, let me not go mad. And just like that, the answer came back, go down to the lobby. Get out of this room. And I took that as a voice from God because I had prayed, let me not go mad, so here's my answer, get down to the lobby. Down I went, staggering a bit, but I sat down on the end of the couch. Some of you know this story. I sat on the end of the couch and just sort of pushed myself in as much as I could to write a letter home. My elbow kept hitting the couch, and a large Indian woman came along and pushed herself between me and the end of the couch. I couldn't figure out what she thought she was doing, but she just pushed and pushed and pushed till she was between me and the end of the couch. I couldn't write at all then, but she kept putting her black, fat arm against mine and just pushing, and I finally thought, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. Somebody does love me. So I would put my arm, she didn't speak a word of English. So I would just put my arm back and pretend that I wasn't enjoying it. But she would sort of just hold. Well, that went on until we were at the other end of the couch. And then I thought, well, I guess I'll leave now and go back to my room. Actually, I was very tired by that time. And I felt much better. So the next day, I thought I would again go down and try to write my letter. And sure enough, she was there again. We went through the same performance. We smiled at each other. And so it was for 4 days, by which time I was feeling much better. And a man came up to me and said, my wife won't be coming to see you anymore. You're better now. And I looked at him, and he said, you were dying. I saw you were dying, and I sent my wife to sit with you. That's India, ladies and gentlemen. As Robert Johnson has made very clear to me, and also Joseph Campbell, trying to help me to understand the things that happened in India. My femininity was born out of that black body. From that point on, there was something radically changed. And I would point out to you that it was a man that set it up. He saw the situation, he honored me, he honored his wife, and he asked her to come to be with me. Then he was the one that came back at the end. So I put that together, and within a few days, I flew to Calcutta. What happened there, you see, in India you have no control over anything, as I said. So I thought it might as well go to Calcutta as anywhere. And I tried to do what God was telling me to do, But anyway, I went to Calcutta. And when I got into the hotel, which was a big old British Empire railroad station, I signed in, and the clerk said, after he'd finished all that, would you mind going up to room such and such and see if you can get the white woman out of there? And I really thought I was crazy. I just looked at him, and he said she'd been in there for days, and she won't come out. So I said, okay, I'll try. By this time, I was in sacred space, you see. And in sacred space, as Jung says, that's God's country. You don't know what's going to happen next, but you just go with what is presented. So I followed this man up through corridor upon corridor, as only British Empire railroad stations could be. He knocked on the door. There was a voice. He turned the key and fled. I went in. There was a woman there, absolutely riveted against the bedboard, just stark stone. And she didn't really look at me. Her eyes were blank. And I had no idea what to do. So I just prayed. By this time I was calling my presence Sophia. I said, Sophia, help me. I have no idea what to do. And I was about as scared as she was, actually. And Calcutta is not a good place for a person alone. And so she wouldn't speak at all, just riveted. So I just sat, and I asked her name, no answer. And finally she just yelled at me in French, say something. So I said, could you tell me your first name? And she gave me her name. And she sort of mumbled, what's yours? I told her, Marion Woodman. And she just came off of the bedboard and looked at me. She was the beautiful professor that she was. She looked at me and she said, are you Ross Woodman's wife? And she said it just like that, afternoon tea in London Art. And I said, yes, I am. Well, she said, he wrote the best book on Shelley I ever read. And by that time, I could say to her, how did you get here? Oh, she said, I was on my way home from a conference. And I just dropped into India for the weekend. Well, then she meant that. She just dropped in. You see what happened? The Black Madonna that saved my life in the Ashoka Hotel, I took into my being. And within 5 days, everything I learned in that presence, a brand new experience for me, as dear Ernest Rossi was saying all afternoon, something new has to come in. And India just shook me in every possible way, one new thing after another. But that feeling of being surrounded by love, being seen for who I was, not for any agenda, not for any power complex, but because I was there. So I was able to bring to this woman what was given to me in the Ashoka. And ladies and gentlemen, I've been bringing it through one way or another ever since. At deeper and deeper levels, reaching up and down. India was my birth into the feminine. All right, so I've just pointed out here that it was the feminine in my life. Illness had caused me to surrender, but awe in the presence of that divine mystery brought me to the consciousness of who I am and who I might be. So I took all my feminine strength and finished my journey to India. I think I'm going to skip a bit here. Let me see. Oh yes, now I'd like to make a little bit of a leap. Isn't it wonderful just to be able to pause and know that your audience loves you, whether you're reading or not? This happened to me in Anaheim. No, it wasn't Anaheim, it was someplace else. And I tell you, I was so nervous, I couldn't see, I couldn't hear, I couldn't do anything. And finally, I just had to give up my notes completely and talk. And of course, everybody cheered with joy. But I'm on a pretty clear timetable here, so I just want to be with it. I'd like to come to the question that blossoms in the fire. What are these blossoms of the fruit tree that are blooming in the fire? Before I identify a few of those blossoms, I have to say that I do not claim them. They have been a part of my work, but they have come with the help of many other people and with Sophia's guidance. When I said 20 years ago at the Pacific graduation that I wanted to be able to say when I died, I have lived my life. And I feel with all that I have told you of the riding that tiny, tiny edge that is the sacred edge between the opposites, I have lived my own life, the life that is and was meant to be my destiny. By that I mean my soul's life, not the ego. To be able to see your own destiny line stretching out before you. To be able to give up your ego desires and recognize that that is not the direction. To stop knocking on all the doors that will not open and turning around, and there is a gorgeous threshold, blue and gold, ready for you to walk through. Knowing that whatever the anguish and the pain of the illness, whatever the anguish and the pain of the marriage, those are the flames that are bringing out your soul in all its strength. And that is what I have been trying to make clear tonight. So now I'd like to look at the blossoms that have come. I just would say, too, that, some of this sounds pretty wild to you, I'm sure, and I have got a wild streak in me. Any of you who are in the intensives know that. But my wildness has always come out of my commitment to finding who I am. Not following anybody else's agenda, not trying to please the ego, but to be true to who I, in my soul, am. I have tried to live this commitment supported by the Virgin archetype. The Virgin that is one in herself, that is not trammeled by other people's ideas, not trammeled by the shame that other people would have put on her, but has found through her own mistakes and strength who she is. That is what gave me the courage and the faith to ride my horse to the edge where I never dreamed of riding. She brings me into an extension I never dreamed I could have, physically, spiritually, mentally. So on this path, I would just like to look at the first blossoms that I chose. Over the past 30 years, I have worked with my two beloved friends, Mary Hamilton and Anne Skinner. Together, we have worked out a design for our workshops that recognizes Jung's conflicts of the opposites at one level of consciousness, and that those conflicts can be healed at another level. Mary was once a national ballet dancer. She brings her expertise to the body, and a voice coach for several of the best theaters in Canada, opens the body to become an instrument through which the breath of life sounds. Together, the three of us recognize the gold that is in the image in the dreams. The images that are the sensations coming from the physical body through the transmitters to that impeccable computer that is the brain. The sensations there are transformed into images that connect body and soul. They are the metaphorical language that connects body, mind, and soul, so exquisitely perfect. We weep at our own foolishness, our own stupidity and neglect when we neglect our dreams. In our work together, Mary opens the body and takes it into deeper relaxation and sounding and verbalizing, and then into the creative work with paint, clay, dance, journaling. Each one reflecting back to consciousness what has been going on in the unconscious, so that gradually you are claiming more and more of the unconscious into your conscious life. Besides the creative energy is the healing energy. Again, those of you who were at Dr. Rossi's talk this afternoon hear that from both sides. The dream also tells us where the energy is trying to go. So that if you don't get any part of the dream except the very end, you have some sense of where the psyche is trying to move. In the sacred temenos of 33 women, we work with those images, body, mind, and soul, for 7 days and nights. watching the energy transform as it is honored in presence. I don't think there's any point at all in a workshop that isn't being held in love. The love is the healing power. And that is a dropping into that place that cherishes another person with no judgment, no power, no agenda. Our patriarchal structure is power and judgment. And most of us have grown up in a vacuum. At the workshops, the one exercise the women hate is the mothering exercise, because they are asked to receive love and then to give it. And they find this just impossible to endure. Is that not a sad comment on our culture? The feminine, that's the whole point of the workshops, is to try to redeem the feminine, personally and culturally. Presence is an essence in the air. Because we are so used to relating through power and judgment, we are used to negative space and vacuum. Modern research is discovering how important the gaze is between mother and infant. Our work attempts to hold that cherishing space, and in holding will eventually open years of shame, fear, rage, and abuse. It also opens the door for an adorable child who is probably as fierce as he is adorable. Mary and Anne, Patty Flowers, our administrator, Dana and Colleen, I'm sorry I don't have their last names, and Paula Reeves, a dear friend of ours, have shared with hundreds of women in 10 countries over the past 20 years. 4 years ago, 2 of the participants, Jennifer Howes and Lynn Butler, created a foundation in order to facilitate the training and assure the quality of the work in the organization as it goes on. The women's dreams are now pushing for a new understanding of the masculine within and without. In response, we are changing our exercises and inviting men to attend some of the intensives. And we have had several men at our intensives, and it changes them completely. And we are really going to attempt to make that work. The problem is that the sexuality becomes so high that we don't really know. We can't control it. And that wrecks the workshop. So if you've got any ideas about that, let me know. Actually, that's the reason we didn't have men in the first place. Because we got into trouble we were doing this once a week, and the energy became so high that the women weren't physically able to deal with what was happening. They'd fall on the floor with exhaustion and fear and shame. So then we decided to split and let some men take over the men's work, and that happened. But now those men want to reunite with women. And actually the women are ready too. We'll see how that works. That's my feminine attitude, I have to say. An interesting outgrowth of our workshops, our group. There's an older group of women. Many of them are here tonight. I'm so amazed that you're here, you dear ones. You've done a long, long traveling, and I know it's not been easy in many other ways for you to come. But these are women who have done a lot of living, and a lot of living in the fire. And now they're trying to bring a deeper consciousness to their lives. What was it all about? Another dimension of the blossoms, I would say, is what Steve made reference to. For years, body work was taboo in the international Jungian scene. They basically mocked me, sort of said, poor little girl, someday you'll grow up. And now, none of them had to work with anorexia or all the rest of the stuff that I have had with body. But I have learned to know Sophia and God through this body, for which I am most grateful. And so this attitude of, let her talk her silliness. And I'm sure Joan knows what I'm talking about only too well. And because of dear Joan and her tender, obstinate nature, we are now part of the international Jungian platform. When we have, they're going to South Africa this year, and we are no longer tacked on the front or the back end of the conference. We are part of the conference. We are attempting to connect present discoveries in neurobiology, the neurosciences, psychoneuroimmunology, natal, prenatal research, medical research, with image and dreams. And Dr. Rossi and I are going to have some time to talk about that tomorrow. I just can't tell you how important it is to try to hold all of this now, because in science it is really moving, and the Jungians have to move with it. They have to. All of this work, I need to say, grew out of the work that we did together at Anaheim, a conference that Tina organized. Tina is here someplace. Where are you, Tina? She organized it, and Alan Shore was there, Dr. Rossi, and Donald Kolshed. And we just kept talking all the time. We weren't speaking. So that much has come. The goal of the journey is the inner marriage. Mature femininity uniting with mature masculinity. Perhaps one day bringing forth a new consciousness related to a unified field. This is what Jung and Polly intuitively visualized. A vision which we in our anguished world need to try to hold. For most of us, our daily task is working to strengthen feminine presence, to cherish the discerning masculine, his strength, his courage, his logos, the sun rising in the evening. And in closing, I would like to give you Rilke's sonnet describing that inner marriage. This is the creature there has never been. They never knew it, and yet they loved the way it moved, its neck, its gaze, mild and serene. Not there, because they loved it, it behaved as if it were. They always left some space. And in that clear, unpeopled space they saved, he gently reared his head, with scarce a trace of not being there. They fed it, not with corn, but only with the possibility of being. And that was able to confer such strength. His brow put forth a horn. One horn to be within the silver mirror and in her. His brow was able to put forth a horn. One horn. Whitely he stole up to the maid to be within the silver mirror and in her. Thank you very, very much. Tony, shall we take some questions? Yes, if any of you have any questions, then we'll try to answer them. Talk about them at least. Did you understand anything I said?
Please use the microphones.
Hi, Mrs. Woodman. Thank you for your presence here. And I'll be brief. I tend to go on, but I just want to tell you thank you for saving my life. Thank you for saving my life. It's your work that has done that and has guided my life and addiction to perfection. And I am very, very grateful for your life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Marion? Hello, Marion?
Yes?
Would you define would you define what you mean by soul? Is it psyche? Is soul psyche for you?
Well, psyche in Greek means soul. But I think perhaps I have a bit more of a religious concept with the word soul rather than psychology. For me, it is psychology. Yes, it is psychology. But it is also that presence that is, for me, much larger than psychology. It is what Dr. Rossi was saying this afternoon, the numinosum, the numinous that can, in a situation, take hold. There's somebody on the floor in front of me that is screaming from abuse. I have no idea what to do except to give her my personal human love. But if I open my being and let that numinosity come through, something totally different happens. So for me, the soul is the eternal part that lives in this body while I'm on earth. Spirit is of fire and air, and I would call spirit the masculine side. And that is the side that can come to soul, drop its golden sperm, and leave. But a whole new energy will be in soul. She is quickened by that union. If you're a writer and you are writing, you know that if that spirit doesn't come in, it's you that's doing the writing, and it's not going to be that great. If you allow the numinosum to come in, you write it. And if you're inflated, you think, my goodness, I'm very good. That's very good. But you may not be able to get it the next time. You see? So it's that, for me, it's the soul, the intermarriage is the soul opening to spirit. And they are the self in Jungian terms. Soul is water and earth in the I Ching, and spirit would be fire and water and air. Thank you for the question.
Hi, Marion.
Hi, Rick.
It's Richard Page. Power. I heard the words. Judgment. And a vacuum. Seems a different way of life from the Black Madonna that snuggled so close to you and saved your life. Seems one is hell and one is heaven. As an Enneagram 8 specializing in holy truth and anger, I've known a lot about the hell part, about power and judgment. And I find that the false light that claims it is, and that's really death, pretending to live. The place that has no judgment, could you talk to me about that?
Did you say you were a priest at one time?
I lived in India in an ashram a few years. I didn't say I was a priest.
No, I'm sorry. I just heard that in the wrong.
Enneagram 8, maybe that was it. No, I don't know.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
You don't have a monitor up there, I know.
No.
Yeah, to hear.
But you're asking me what I mean by...
By living without judgment, beyond power and judgment that you mentioned.
Well,
And the vacuum.
I don't think it happens all at once. I think that this is riding the sword. And, you know, hiding within the flames. For me, anorexia, you can't imagine a person more into power, because she's trying to defeat her own body. She's trying to defeat everything around her. And it's a power complex, and she's the victim of that. So I had to learn a lot about surrender and basically giving over to soul. Now, how to do that? Well, I think once you're committed, God, Sophia, puts the elements in the road that you have to deal with. And the ante keeps going up. And you simply don't know what to do. And you see people fighting over nothing. You know, they're projecting on each other, they're projecting their own shadow onto the other person, and you see how mad it is. But for you to get out of it, in my experience, it has taken huge suffering. And cancer, I think, well, you know, one day I was praying like mad, please, God, don't let me die. I don't believe it's my time. And I was lighting all the candles on the, where they have the candles, and I went home that night and I thought, not my will, but thine be done. Now I have to just make one more statement there, and that is that it was Christmas time. And, you know, I'd seen all the Christmas decorations and everything. It hadn't meant much to me, I must say. And Ross was with me, and both of us were pretty far down. And because we were pretty sure we were going to get really bad news. And then the doctor didn't have the report, so we were free for one day. That night I dreamt that I was a shepherd on the hills in Bethlehem. And we heard this music. And the crowd of angels was coming toward us. You know, the angels that came to the shepherds and sang and said, "Fear not, I bring you good tidings of great joy." Well, there was one angel who was gorgeous. He was big, and he was sexy, and he was blonde with blue hair. I mean, blue eyes. And he was just wondrous to behold. Big wings of angels in America. And he just took me by the arms and said, "Fear not." I tell you, that's a new fear not. But you know, it changed my life. There was something in that was so powerful. I was able to say, not my will, but thine be done, your way. And so for me, it's allowing the divine to come in, to bisect your life. And whether it's with other people or with you and the divine alone, step by step by step, you come to that place where you couldn't care less about having power over anybody else, and you're not going to waste your time on judgment. It just isn't worth it. There's so much joy and beauty and love in life. But sometimes that doesn't come until later, you know. But you work at it your whole life. I'm sure the Crones know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion.
Thank you. Great question. That's the biggest question, of course. That surrender, that is not giving up. Surrender is a very weak word in our culture, but it doesn't mean giving up in the terms I'm using it. It means surrendering to a higher consciousness, even when you don't know what's going to happen. Well, I think that's enough, ladies and gentlemen, and I thank you very, very much.